Right, welcome back everyone. So recap of the first Pmqs of the month. Second one comes out later today. So let's just refresh our memories. Yeah. So question one, Keir Starmer continues with the Nadeem Zahawi line and asks, did the chair, Zahawi, tell the Prime Minister he was under investigation before or after the appointment? Rishi refers to the independent investigation he did a couple weeks ago, but Keir Starmer's question was about his appointment, which was a couple months ago. Keir Starmer rules of how the investigation into the chair was in the newspapers and was public knowledge. Was the information hidden or was he just incurious? Because this all came out in like July. Rishi says that the usual procedures followed, nothing was brought to him. Keir Starmer says, nobody told me, I didn't ask, I didn't know. Is the PM going to claim he was unaware of the Deputy PM's bullying allegations? Rishi responds that he followed due process and appointed an advisor when he was made aware. Recently, a Labour MP came forward that being in Labour was abusive and his office undermined her. He can't stand up for the country. This is Rishi talking about Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer returns. Last count, Deputy PM was up for 24 counts of bullying. How would he feel if someone he knew was forced to work in that environment because the boss was too weak to do anything? Rishi's response was that Keir Starmer didn't answer his question. When he was made aware, he took action. Keir Starmer said that hate has spread unchallenged in the Labour Party, as if he wasn't sitting next to Jeremy Corbyn, declining to lead and not standing up for the principles that matter. Keir Starmer says, just like his predecessor, ducking responsibility was fine for PM, but at least his predecessor didn't act high and mighty. What is a coincidence that the people who helped Boris Johnson get an 800k loan got top jobs at the BBC and the British Council? Rishi says the appointment process is transparent and rigorous and fully supported by the cross-party select committee, including Labour MPs. Keir Starmer voted to oppose minimum safety legislation and he voted to water down public order bill and the unions and Just Stop Oil bankrolled his party. Keir Starmer sides with extremists and protesters. The PM and the government stand for hard-working people and children. Keir Starmer says that 13 years in power, blaming Labour for strikes is pathetic. Tory addiction to sleaze and scandal has done extreme damage to the Crown Prosecution Service is trash, health service is trash, and the economy is shrinking, and the taxpayer is expected to pay for Boris Johnson's legal fees. Rishi says that Keir Starmer can't stand up to union bosses, can't stand up for school children or women in his party. He can't figure out what he believes. The government and Rishi will keep delivering for the country. Now it's Stephen Flynn of the SNP's turn. 3 years of Brexit, we have learned three things. Trade deficit has grown, economic hit of 100 billion each year, and the UK economy is the worst performing. Does the PM believe we can remain outside the EU? Rishi says that the UK has grown the same as Germany and that the Brexit advantages to deliver for fishing and farming in Scotland and two new free ports for the government. Conservatives respect referendums, unlike the SNP, because there was a referendum to leave the UK. Stephen Flynn says, let's be clear, 2023-22 has the worst economic standards since 1930, and that the UK is going to perform worse than Russia, who has all the sanctions. Rishi says that the main impact of the economy at the moment is the inflation and the war in Ukraine, and that's why the economy is so bad. But he says that Stephen Flynn should just stand up for the people of Scotland and stop worrying about all this stuff. So let's break it down. Keir tied Zahawi and Dominic Raab allegations together by highlighting how Rishi is essentially claiming ignorance of the issues surrounding both men in question at the time of their appointments, but that as soon as he was aware that he took decisive action, but the issues and allegations for Zahawi and Raab were not new things. Zahawi was made Chancellor in October. The investigation was in the papers in July, so make it make sense. And Raab has 24 counts of bullying to his name and was Deputy PM when Rishi was Chancellor, so there's no way he didn't have any idea about this situation, which highlights his weakness and how mired in sleaze and scandal the Tories really are. Rishi accused Keir of not standing up to bullies in the Labour Party. Then Rishi attacks Keir Starmer for being in Jeremy Corbyn's team, who is not accused of anything, but Keir Starmer being in his party is comparable to the things that Rishi is dealing with or failing to deal with. Again with the Jeremy Corbyn line, so it's clear that this was another tough one for Richie. It's arguable that Rishi lied during his response to the first question, which isn't allowed in the House of Commons. The Chancellor at the time, Zahawi, was under investigation by HMRC, which he was effectively the boss of, and the National Crime Agency was involved. So it's highly unlikely that Rishi didn't know about this, especially upon becoming PM. He would have been updated or at least brought up to speed with everything that's happened prior to him becoming Prime Minister, because the officials that are part of the Treasury slash HMRC would have known and ideally would have told him. The question about the loan borrowers secured, then rewarded with a job at the BBC, is a prime example of corruption, and Rishi's comeback about the selection committee and process, including Labour MPs, doesn't hold up to scrutiny because it's highly unlikely that the Labour MPs or any MPs involved on that selection process would have known what was going on with the situation, in particular when vetting the man who would become the BBC chairperson. And then Rishi tried to fold Labour into the mess, but it's not working. What was shocking at this point was the revelation that Boris is using taxpayer money to fund his legal advice for the investigations he is under for all the parties that took place during the COVID lockdowns. That is absolutely mad. I know that ex-prime ministers get certain benefits for life once they stop being PM, but to use our tax money to fund your legal defense for the crimes you claim you are unaware of is absolutely foul. And especially considering he's been doing a lot of like speeches and stuff and getting paid to just talk rubbish, like he shouldn't need public money to pay for your private defense. Then the SNP Westminster leader, Stephen Flynn, asked if the UK can remain outside the EU, and in his reply to Rishi said, does Rishi blame Scots for wanting independence when the country as a whole is forecast to do worse economically this year than Russia, who has loads of sanctions because of the war that they've started with Ukraine? Rishi saying the cause of the economic turmoil is the war in Ukraine and inflation, and that Brexit has allowed the UK to provide benefits to the fishing and farming industries, which are both untrue, as the fishing industry is worse now than it was in 2015/16 when the Brexit referendum happened. And the farming industry is going down the drain also because they both relied heavily on the EU for exporting. The former case, so fishing relied heavily for exporting and subsidies for farming. Also, the most comparable country in Europe to the UK is France, and they have grown year on year since the pandemic ended because while still dealing with the war and inflation, the elephant in the economic room is Brexit, and the cost is being felt in pockets because the added paperwork and bureaucracy that comes with not being in the EU and the single market and the customs union is forcing companies to pass on the costs to us because it costs more to get products into the country. But anyway, that was the latest P&Qs. We'll see what's going on later on today when them man are at again at 12. Tune in next time because politically it's peak.